The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
You're listening to the Best Birth Podcast, and today our expert is Carlie Palmer-Webb. We are so excited to have Carlie on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And she has such an amazing bio. So Carlie Palmer-Webb is a sex educator and founder of the Christian Sex Educator Platform, where she provides faith-based, research-backed guidance on healthy sexuality and relationships. With a background in marriage and family studies, Carlie empowers individuals and couples to embrace sexual intimacy as a gift from God, free from shame and misinformation. Through her courses, social media presence, and speaking engagements, she helps bridge the gap between faith and sexual health. We are so excited to have you on the show, Carlie.
Thank you so much.
I think the most important thing that we have learned throughout this entire podcast is there are changes that occur with pregnancy.
I think that feels really overwhelming and scary, but I think a lot of that is just the unknown. And I'm grateful that you are talking about it and making it more normal to talk about it, because if it's not so unknown, then it doesn't quite feel as scary.
Well, and that's exactly how I felt when I started becoming a birth worker. Is like, I just want a big sister to hold my hand and guide me through everything, because without someone who is able to tell you, I've been there, I know what it's like, and this is what I did to help in that specific problem, we're just not able to do it alone. So we're so excited that you're here with us today. And tell us a little bit more how you got into the field of being a sex educator.
Well, it honestly was kind of accidental. It started just as a journey of seeking out my own sex education. I came from a very loving, very happy home, but one in which sex, bodies, birth included, those things were never talked about. And so as I graduated from high school and went to college, I realized just how lacking my sex education had been. So my journey kind of started just trying to find resources for someone like me who is Christian and who had some convictions about what I wanted sex to mean, but honestly didn't know much about it. I just wanted resources that were made for people like me, and I couldn't find many, at least not for singles. And I didn't get married till I was 28, so I had a decade of adulthood where I needed more resources. So I started searching, found some here and there, but the journey eventually led to me deciding that there needed to be more information in this space. And so when I went to graduate school, I did so with the goal of becoming a sex educator. At the time, I thought I would be a professor and I would teach healthy sexuality classes that way. The online model came later, but that's how I eventually came into this space.
I love that you were able to bridge that gap between the education that you desired and helping the world at large. That's amazing. So what do you think are some of the most common misconceptions about sex and intimacy when it comes to pregnancy?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is pain. I mean, a lot of that is postpartum, but there is still a lot of conversations that are happening about painful pregnancy sex. There are hormonal changes, of course, that occur during pregnancy. We know that. Anyone who has experienced it knows very well that there are a lot of hormonal changes. And some of those changes can cause things like vaginal dryness, which can lead to more discomfort with sex. Every sexual myth comes from some seeds of truth. So there is a possibility for more uncomfortable or painful sex during pregnancy. The myth, I guess, is that that's normal and that there's nothing that can be done about it and that we should just push through. We shouldn't. Not during pregnancy, not during postpartum. At no point should painful sex be something that we just assume is normal and push through. So that's a big one. But I also think that there is this idea that sex is kind of going to die, that we're not going to ever want sex again, not just during pregnancy, but it's like, well, It was fun while it lasted, but now we're pregnant and then we're going to be postpartum and then we're going to be exhausted because we have kids and our sex life will never be the same. And in some ways, it's true. Your sex life will never be the same, but that can be in such good ways. Like sex during pregnancy will be different. And for those of us who get really sick during pregnancy, there likely will be long periods when you're not having sex. But the sex life that you want, that's so happy and fulfilling and pleasurable and exciting, it's not over just because you get pregnant. Might be put on pause for a little bit, but it's not over.
Will you just give us maybe one or two of those myths and if there is a solution to it?
One myth is that your body will change too much during pregnancy and postpartum for sex to be enjoyable. That's simply not true. Your body will change, but it doesn't make your body unable to experience pleasure and joy and fulfillment in your sexual relationship. A big solution to that, to combating that myth, is changing our belief system around that, trying to believe that sex really can be good after pregnancy, after our postpartum period. But another part of it is seeking out treatment when you need it. If sex is no longer enjoyable, if sex is painful for you during pregnancy or postpartum, there are absolutely things that we can do to change that. So reaching out to your doctor, to an OB, to a pelvic floor physical therapist. I went to pelvic floor physical therapy after I had my son because I was experiencing pain with intercourse, and it worked absolute wonders for me. So if that's an option for you, I wish that more insurances covered it. But if that's an option for you, seeking out help is a big one there as well.
My first son ended in an unplanned C-section. And so after 6 weeks postpartum and we had engaged sexual intercourse again, I was shocked that it was painful during sex because I didn't even have a baby vaginally. But that was something no one ever told me, was that you can also experience the pelvic floor dysfunction when it comes to pain during penetration. And the conversation that needs to be had, that there is help and that pelvic floor therapy during pregnancy and after pregnancy is one of the solutions.
Yes, totally. I love that you bring that up. That throws a lot of people off that have a C-section, but pregnancy, yes, and birth will all impact your pelvic floor function, regardless of how the baby is delivered. So it's definitely something to be aware of, if you're delivering vaginally or having a C-section, pelvic floor dysfunction can happen either way.
Yeah, I have become a VUDAC advocate, and one of the main reasons is because of the discomfort that I felt for many months after my first son was born. But as I come to think of it, there are many people who have a C-section and do not have that discomfort, and their discomfort came from their vaginal delivery, but it's more related to their pelvic floor health.
Yes, definitely. I wish there was a way to say, okay, if you do this, this will be your experience. But everyone's experience is just so varied. So what you need to know is that if you experience pain postpartum, and that can be from intercourse or it can be from other sexual activities, if you experience pain at 6 weeks when you start trying again, or if you are still experiencing pain months after that, it's not normal in that we should just allow it to happen. But it is normal in that a lot of women experience it, and you can reach out for help at any time. After I had my son, we were traveling for my husband's job, and I didn't have a way to get to a pelvic floor physical therapist for several months. And so I actually didn't start pelvic floor PT until my son was 6 months old, and I was still having pain when we would try to have intercourse. And within 3 weeks of going to pelvic floor physical therapy, I could tell a dramatic difference. Like no more sharp pain, some initial discomfort that we worked on that went away after a few more appointments. But even 6 months postpartum, just a few appointments helped so much.
I love that resource. We've had a few different pelvic floor therapists on the podcast and talk a little bit about rebuilding this intimacy. I think that there can be some emotionality that's attached if you are experiencing pain in sex after your baby comes, because it can put a wedge between you. It can make you feel distant. It can make your partner feel like they're doing something wrong. Can you tell us about how you help couples rebuild that intimacy in their relationship?
Well, I think a big thing is the expectations that we have going into our sexual relationship during pregnancy and postpartum can make a really big difference. Some of the expectations that might be unhelpful is that your sexual relationship should be exactly the same during pregnancy and the postpartum period as it was prior. If we can shift that to our sexual relationship will be different, and how can we explore intimacy in different ways? Just that shift alone can make a really big difference. So couples who are struggling in pregnancy and postpartum to connect outside of the bedroom and within the bedroom, a big thing that I encourage them to do is explore different areas of intimacy. So for a lot of couples, intercourse, vaginal penetration is a huge, huge part of their sexual relationships before pregnancy and postpartum. For many couples, that won't be as big a part of their sexual relationship for months, however many months there are. Some women actually experience an increased desire during pregnancy. A lot of women experience a large decrease in desire during pregnancy, and a lot are just so sick that they can't even think about it. So all of those things are okay. But if you are having a period of time where intercourse isn't going to be as big of a part of your relationship, find other ways to connect both sexually and non-sexually. So it feels kind of strange to couples to feel like, wait, we can still have a sexual relationship without having intercourse, which is what a lot of people refer to as sex. I think that sex is broader than that. But yes, you absolutely can have a sexual relationship without having intercourse. So I would explore that first. You can use your hands. Even just cuddling naked, being together without clothing can be a big deal. But you can find ways to bring each other pleasure for both of you to experience orgasm if that's something that you're wanting to do without intercourse. So those things I would explore for sure. But I think a really big part too is there's so many changes happening and it can feel really overwhelming. So sex is way back on the priority list, right? Way down on the priority list. And that's fine in a lot of ways, right? Sometimes sex is higher on the priority list and sometimes it's lower on the priority list, and that's normal. But the connection that you're experiencing as a couple needs to be high on the priority list, even if it's not sexual connection in this stage, right? And so I think that having regular, compassionate conversations about how you can support each other emotionally and how you can connect as a couple throughout this process is really important. Sometimes that connection will be just like holding hands, sitting kind of far apart because you can't actually stand the smell of your partner while you're pregnant. That's okay. But we have to find ways to still prioritize our connection with our partner, even if our sexual connection isn't as big a part of that.
And one thing that strikes me, we create connection, especially once we have young children and we're managing their schedules, we're managing feeding them all throughout the night. We have to be intentional about creating a relationship that we want. It's not just a sexual connection, but it's also an intimate, it's a compassionate connection that we show the other person that we cherish them and we want them to be on our priority list.
Definitely. And I think in these stages where life is a lot more overwhelming and really busy and we're not feeling our best, it might look different in that it might not be a weekly date night and really long periods of like cuddling and watching things together and going out and playing your favorite sports together or doing your favorite activities, there may be less of that. But the moments of connection where your wife is feeling really sick and you just come next to her and put your hand on her and say, thank you so much for what you're doing to carry this baby. I know that it's hard. It means so much to me. And when the baby comes, you'll both be exhausted. Of course you will. And it's mayhem. Postpartum is just a wild period. But just the moments of expressing gratitude, expressing how much you love your person, expressing that you're attracted to your person in these different stages can be really important too. These little moments of trying to connect, trying to help, offering compassion, it makes a really big difference in the connection that you feel. And even if parts of your connection are different, even if your sexual connection is on the back burner for a time, it will be easier to rekindle that sexual connection when you're ready if there is consistent connection of some kind between the two of you throughout these stages.
The consistent connection is such a good reminder. Love the concept of an embrace, a hug where you are not the first person to let go.
Yes, yes. And I know that hugging can be a little tricky when you're pregnant. It can feel a little less fun, but it's important.
Absolutely. Well, I want to ask a question a little bit about values and how women can help to keep their values strong when we feel so much pressure from society. How do you help women to differentiate between those values and to honor what they feel is most important to them?
Women as a whole need to be encouraged to really tap into their own beliefs and their own desires often and to cultivate those things. I think generally as a group, we have been raised to be kind and to be self-sacrificing. And I think there is so much beauty in that. And motherhood of any kind will, of course, require a lot of sacrifice. And that is one of the most beautiful things I think about it. And as women, we also need to tap into the things that we really want and that we truly believe and try to find space for our voice in this choice of sacrifice that we lead as well. The process of becoming a mother, we have to find ways. Journaling is a big one for me, but we have to find ways to tap into our desires, our values, and keep hold of that, even through a period that requires so much sacrifice.
Yeah, the transformation of motherhood does not mean that you have to lose yourself and the desires that you hold dear. You talk a lot about sexual pleasure being a gift, and which seems to tie in perfectly that sometimes what we need is what we are unwilling to ask for, and that might be more sexual connection. Can you tell us how you help women feel with less shameful about that desire of wanting sexual pleasure?
Yeah, I think a big piece of this, I talk a lot about our personal beliefs about sex because while we have been taught things, the things that impact us are the beliefs that we're holding on to. So if we were taught growing up that we needed to shut off our desire, that all sexual pleasure or sexual desire needed to be avoided, it can be really hard to feel like those things are good things. So we have to shift the beliefs. If we're holding on to beliefs that sexual pleasure and sexual desire are sinful or evil or masculine is one, we have to do some work to shift those beliefs. And a lot of that is finding new beliefs to attach or to like grab onto, you know? The belief that sexual desire is a gift from God is a big one for me, that I was created with the capacity for sexual desire, with the capacity for sexual pleasure, and that those things were given to me to make my life better and to help me to experience and express love those are beliefs that I have practiced believing for years now, because I had the belief that my sexual desires and my sexual pleasure were inherently sinful. So it took a long time to make the shift, but finding beliefs that I could kind of hold on to, that I'm like, okay, I can almost believe that. If I keep telling myself that, I could almost believe that. And with time, it becomes easier. So a big part is shifting beliefs. But one other thing I think that women experience is not just the belief that pleasure is bad or sinful or they shouldn't want it, but they feel selfish. They feel guilty for wanting it. Maybe not sinful, but they feel like, no, I should be totally focused on my partner's pleasure during sex, and thinking about my own pleasure is selfish and not okay. That's just not true. There's no other way for me to explain it. During a sexual encounter, both you and your partner's experience are equally important. And it is totally okay, not only okay, but required to unlock the kind of sex that you want to have, for you to prioritize both your partner's and your own sexual experience. And both of you can prioritize both experiences, or the experience as a whole. You don't have to be 100% focused on them and not even think about yourself for sex to be good. In fact, it can't really. You both need to be willing to advocate for what you want and be willing to advocate for their experience as well. So if you need permission to advocate for yourself, here it is, if that helps. I think another thing to keep in mind is that if you are in a loving and healthy relationship, which I hope all of your listeners are, if they're in a relationship, I hope that it's loving and healthy. But in that case, your person wants you to love sex too. And that actually contributes to them enjoying it. The more you enjoy it, the more they enjoy it. So really, it's for the greater good that you tap into your pleasure and advocate for things that you want. And I realize that some who are listening are like, okay, that's great, except I don't know what I want. I don't know what feels good to me. I don't know how to experience pleasure. And if that's your experience, then you get to go on a beautiful journey of exploration. And you can do that with your partner. Find some resources that give you specific guidelines on things to try. And just explore. No pressure. Just explore together and find what things you do enjoy, what things make sex really happy and meaningful and pleasurable for you. Then do more of those things.
I love the permission that you give to women, that they can have the most fulfilling sexual encounters and relationship with their partners. That's wonderful. I think that when it comes to all of these beliefs, it really stems from the education that we have. And the transformation of becoming a mother also comes with the responsibility to then help teach our children. You have some tools in your tool belt about how to help our children understand their potential and ways that we can help them embrace their own sexuality.
I do. I have so many. We could have such a long conversation about this, but I'll provide just a few to start. The first thing I would say is sex education needs to start early, and it needs to be a conversation that we're having regularly. So when parents ask, when do I need to start to talk to my kids about bodies and sex? I say, as soon as they're born. And of course, we're not teaching the mechanics of sex to our toddlers. But I say when they're born so that you can start practicing as a parent, teaching healthy body education from a young age before your kids really understand it. So by the time they do understand, we're more comfortable discussing those things. Most of us didn't have very much education at home about these kinds of things. So even for me, it takes practice saying things. This is my career, and I still have to practice saying things in the ways that I want to teach my kids to make them more comfortable, because it just wasn't something I had growing up. So start when they're young. Talk about bodies in positive, healthy, non-shameful ways. And then when we do start introducing the mechanics of sex, the basic mechanics of sex and pregnancy and delivery, which I encourage parents to do between the ages of 7 and 9 for the first time. When we do that, we'll have the foundation of healthy body talk and understanding. So that's the first one. Start early, talk about it often. The second one is from a young age, use correct anatomical terms for all body parts, including genitals, especially genitals, maybe. So we want our children to grow up believing that their bodies are good, the whole thing, that no part of them is shameful. No part of them is sinful. There are parts that are private, and you can teach them the difference between private parts and parts that aren't private. But one way that we can teach them that bodies are normal and good is to use correct anatomical terms. When we use cutesy terms for body parts, for genitals, we communicate, even if it's not purposeful, that those body parts, there's something about them that's a little different. They're hush-hush. They're maybe a little taboo. We shouldn't talk about them. We shouldn't bring them up. And kids need to feel comfortable asking questions. They need to feel comfortable talking to you about different things. So using correct anatomical terms is a big one. The last tip I'll give right now is when you do introduce the idea of sex to your children, teach them about it, assuming that they will have a healthy relationship with it. Teach in a way that you think this will help them to have healthy sexual relationships in the future. When our goal is strictly to keep our children from having sex, when abstinence is our only goal, it's really tempting to use fear and shame as motivators because they can be effective motivators short term. But unfortunately, when we teach our children to avoid sex using things like fear and shame, then that doesn't prepare them for healthy self-beliefs about their own sexuality or healthy sexual relationships in the future. So you absolutely can encourage your children to wait to have sex until whatever you feel like is right for them, until they're in a marriage, until you feel like they're in a happy and healthy, safe relationship, until they're an adult, whatever you believe, right? You can teach them abstinence in healthy ways without shame and fear. But I would just try and teach in a way that is focused on helping them have future healthy relationships rather than making abstinence the only goal.
That is transformative. The ability to teach with the goal in mind that they are having that healthy relationship. If you are teaching them to make choices and to be responsible. I recently read the book Ejaculate Responsibly. It gave me so much enthusiasm for teaching my sons. I only have sons right now, 3 boys, and it just seems like such an important thing to teach them that men are responsible for birth control. It is not just a woman's lot in life to have to be responsible because we have pregnancy that follows, but teaching them about their bodies and consent and healthy relationships, all of that is just so pivotal. I love that.
Yes, I love that thought that you brought into. I think the more conversations we have with our kids when they're young about bodies, about safe and unsafe touch, about privacy, the more comfortable it will be to have conversations with our teenagers about responsible ejaculation, for example, or about healthy sexual relationships, about pregnancy prevention. If we're planning on starting our kids' sex education around the age of puberty, if we're at that point, you can absolutely still offer your children so much. Please do it if you are starting at that point. But if we start much earlier, those conversations later on will be much easier and much more comfortable for our kids because they'll be used to talking about these kinds of things with us.
And we can build a house brick by brick instead of just all of a sudden having to have the house appear if they're 12 or 13 years old.
Totally. It's a lot less overwhelming for sure.
We love sharing resources on the podcast. I know that your own career and platform is a huge resource. Do you have any other books or things that you could recommend to us?
So some of my very favorite books for couples are Come As You Are by Dr. Emily Nagoski. She's a sex researcher and has a better understanding, I think, more complete understanding of female sexual desire and pleasure than maybe any other educator that I'm aware of. The book Come As You Are is a phenomenal resource, especially for couples who have a large discrepancy in desire. Whatever that discrepancy looks like, that book can be really helpful. For Christian couples who struggle with things like sexual shame, struggling with the idea of duty sex, which is incredibly problematic, the book, The Great Sex Rescue by Dr. Sheila Gregor is one of my very favorites for overcoming some of those negative beliefs about sex that we may have learned growing up in purity culture. Another one that I love is called Satisfaction Guaranteed. It's by Dr. Batsheva Marcus. And this book is really interesting because it gives you an opportunity to identify specific problems within your sexual relationship and then gives you a solution for that problem or gives you some ideas on solving that problem. So I like the practicality of that resource a lot. Then for teaching kids, I created guidebooks for parents for teaching kids that gives you specific lessons to teach at each age. But then other books that I love for teaching, well, there are a lot of children's books that I love. I think every home should have the Smithsonian Body Encyclopedia for Kids. Just having open conversations about bodies and being able to show them correct anatomical diagrams. I love that book. It's really cool. But then some other ones I love. I Said No for teaching consent. I love the Good Pictures, Bad Pictures junior version for talking to your young kids about pornography. I don't love the older kids version as much. It's still a good resource, but I really love the junior version. So that's another one. Oh, I could probably think of so many more, but both are the ones that come to my mind right off.
Well, those books are going to be in everybody's Amazon carts. We'll add some links in the show notes so people can have those resources. And Carlie, this has just been an amazing conversation today. We'd like to share a Mom Squad secret before we go, and this week it's by Jessica. She said, when we're preparing to have a baby, it's normal to go beyond 40 weeks. Try to increase your oxytocin with massage, nipple stimulation, a little bit of curb walking, and laughing. All of the good stuff will bring your baby soon.
Love that. If anyone is interested at that point in pregnancy, sex and orgasm can also increase oxytocin.
Carlie, thank you so much for being on the podcast this week.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. We hope you've been elevated and inspired by this week's expert.
Subscribe today so you never miss an episode. And please share our podcast or post on your social media so that other moms and dads-to-be can also have the best birth.
Please note that the information provided is based on the expert's insights and personal experience. It is not intended as medical guidance. Please seek the advice of your medical provider as it applies to your specific condition.